hopefully my system will work.
Oh, that's okay. Like, we'll just figure it out on the fly, right?
If it drops off, sometimes it drops off up here in Hamilton. We don't have the same sort of technology as Christchurch.
Well, we are in the middle of Middle Earth. So
yeah, it's a beautiful place.
Nice to be able to like drop off the grid. Real
Totally.
Nice.
Yep.
I just want to say thank you for agreeing to have a conversation in the first place, and a shout out to a member at the gym who pushed me onto you, Jess. She will no doubtably be listening, so thank you, mate. Absolute legend. I'll give you some space to introduce yourself, I guess, and all the stuff that you've done, which is insane.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, eh? Like I always feel a little bit embarrassed talking about the things I've been able to be involved in, but I've been very lucky. I was a traditional clinical psychologist by training. I'm not at the moment now. I guess now I think it was 19 or 20 years. I didn't just pull my registration, so I've retired. That started off in forensics. I was working with some of the most at risk, serious offenders in Auckland, in the community, and it was when I was doing my training as a clinical psych, and then I worked with our social services or child, youth and family. We have a little branch that's connected with the police through the child abuse team. So I spent a lot of time there. So I guess I was working in the darklands really. And then had 2 daughters. And then as a part of becoming a dad, and, it became a little bit more difficult to have compassion and empathy for people that chose violence and hurting children. And so I started to just as a hobby, I started to work, put together a program for sport. And that was probably, would have been early 30s. And there wasn't many people working in sports psychology and sport at that point. And then I think it was maybe the mid 2000s, I started to work as a psychologist or performance psychologist, because I had no idea really what that was, as I was just drawing across from clinical psychology into sport. And I was working with a club premier rugby team in the Waikato for 3 years, and a golf team, one of the local golf pennants teams. And the rugby team did pretty bloody well. And then that opened a door just through someone knowing I was doing that. And I didn't even know who they were, but they knew that I was doing that with this particular sport, this rugby team. And then did a little bit of work with the Counties Rugby Academy and Northland Rugby Academy. And then it's amazing how opportunities just come along for people, and whether you step into them or not defines your destiny. And then the rugby union asked me to go to Wellington and just talk a little bit about what I was doing with the academies as part of the mental skills network, which was establishing through a guy called Mike Chu at the rugby, and he did a lot in that space for the discipline back in the old days. And I said, sure, I'll pop down. So I went down, and my program was called Killer Instinct Sports Psychology for Rugby. That was what it was called. And so I was about to talk to about 4 or 5 people in one of the big rooms in the old rugby union building down on the harbour, and the door opens and all the Super Rugby coaches walk in.
Wow.
And because they were obviously doing their yearly catch-up, I had no idea then really what was what. And they sat down, so there must have been about 15 of them. And then they sat down, and then the doors opened again, and in walked Shag, Ted and Wayne Smith. And then they sat down, and Mike Drew goes, oh, there you go, David, carry on. And I had just about to start, and I think pretty much the first line I said, Wayne Smith put his hand up, and he goes, I think you're completely wrong, mate. Well, I don't know what planet you're on.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. And then I just thanked him for his feedback. I can't remember exactly what I said. I went, oh, cheers, Smithy. I'll take that on board. And then at the end of my presentation, Shag walks over and goes, mate, I think you're right. Oh, I think you're on the right track. That's exactly right. So I'm like, oh, okay. And then Ian Foster came up to me afterwards and said, where are you based? You're not, okay. And that was the start of it, really. That's where I met Fozzie. I shot in and caught up with Fozzie and the coaches, the following week, and talked a little bit about what I was doing. And then he gave me an opportunity to talk to, I think, 9 of the men in a little group. Their senior men, he got them together and gave me an hour with them to talk about what I did. And obviously just that was the start of it, really. And it's funny, it's when you look back, like that was 2008, and I spent 11 years with the Chiefs, right through until 2019. So I wrapped up with them after Colin Cooper finished. So with Fozzie for 3 years, Dave Rennie for 6, and ironically Smithy came along with friends, and I love Smithy to bits, and we had some amazing opportunities to learn from him while he was with the Chiefs, and we both laugh now about how we first met. So I was very lucky to spend that much time with him, because he was obviously amazing, influential for the evolution of what Chiefs became in that era. And then Colin Cooper, and finished with Colin Cooper when Coops finished, because I knew Coops before he came there. So you'll know that too. Rugby's such a small community, and really good people. And Colin Cooper's one of the best of them. So they had, that was a formative time, really. Like I was working the Olympic space then too, because I was very lucky to come into sports psychology at the front of the wave, really. I was the only clinical psychologist in the business. And that's, it automatically gives you a little bit of an advantage, because the reputation of a clinical psych is quite strong. So it really did, I believe, open some doors that wouldn't have opened probably otherwise. And then the industry just took off. So I was crossed from rugby pretty quickly into high performance sport. Back then it was the old Academy of Sport. And had I've been in 3 Olympics, involved in 3 Olympics now, campaigns. I met Gordon Titchens in 2009, 2010. And then I've been with the Sevens boys for ever since. So come up to 12 years with them. And then obviously a big chunk of that time with Titch, and then Clark Laidlaw's there now. So again, the learning with the people, all very different people, but the learning's just massive, when you spend that much time in one space. And then I had a chance to work with Jamie Joseph and the Japan crew in the World Cup in Japan, which was an amazing experience. But again, just classy coaches, So Brownie and Jake are just next level. They work, they complement and work together incredibly well. So again, I was very lucky to step into a space where highly coached, great structure, really good processes, great leadership teams, good men. So you can't help but just learn an amazing amount in those environments, and and they've all been pretty successful. All those environments are pretty up there with regards to performance and outcome. I've had some down times as well. I remember I had my darkest. I think first year with Fozzie, we went to the finals against the Bulls, and I think the next year we finished 10th or 14th. But man, the next year was dark. I think we had, anyone that knows Super Rugby, you lose. I think we lost 6 in a row or 5 in a row. That's dark times, man, when it starts to get that dark. And then obviously the time with Renz and Smithy and Tom Coventry and Andrew Strawbridge was the heyday, really. That was when I think the franchise really stepped into a completely new dimension. And then obviously Gordon Titchens is an amazing man and has a great legacy, great history. He's a unique man, amazing man. And then obviously Clark Laidlaw's top shelf. That team's won under his coaching everything except the one game at the Olympics in Tokyo. So doing some amazing things. Obviously, there'll be a change now because a lot of our men are so senior men are moving on, and some are going to 15. So it'll be a rebuilding for us over there. But you can guarantee that crew will be round about it again at Paris. So I guess summarising all of that, yeah, man, I've been very lucky to turn my hobby into something that's paid the mortgage. Learn, everything I do, I'm really clear with people. It's the product of being around some sensational, amazing coaches, and seeing how they do what they do, and then some amazing athletes that, like, I feel really embarrassed because I reckon they would have all done what they did without me, because they teach me more than I ever teach them. So, I've got, I've been very, very lucky, and I feel very, I do feel embarrassed because of, I guess that maybe not luck, but it feels like it's been a lovely run. I'm 49 now. I'm kicking into learning how to be a sheep and beef farmer. My dad's my coach and mentor now because he's an old school farmer. Bought a little block. I've never owned land, so I bought a little block and spent a lot of time with my mum and dad. And obviously, I'm still doing a lot of sport, but it's certainly becoming. It's a funny transition. That, you become very familiar, and I guess it's like a relationship, really. It goes through the early phases of being, oh yeah, this is amazing, and then you get into the middle parts, which is some, I guess, the bread and butter business of having kids and doing the hard yards, and then you get to a point where it might be a little bit like your, the long summer. Like it feels like I'm in that space where I feel really lucky to have found a point where I know what I'm doing, and feel really clear about that. And then that's pretty, I find it's pretty special to get to that point, but it's certainly not a complacency either. Like I still work, doesn't matter who it is I'm talking with, I'm treating them like they're they're all treated the same, and I work my ass off to try and figure out how to help them get achieve their dreams and be their best. So I know what I'm doing, but I'm also not sure, like if it's a nice little balance of knowing what I'm doing, but also never resting in that space of, I don't know everything, like it's, and there's there, I'm really clear. I know 3 or 4 times the academic that I am. Like I struggle with academic conversations. I've applied 15 times to the clinical psychology program because every university has one. So for 3 years, I applied to every university. So on the 15th application, I got an interview because I was just desperate for men. There's no way I'd get in the clinical psychology programs these days. That the levels are just insane with the type of people that make those programs. So, I guess the sun was shining at the right times in my life, and I just happened to be there. So, I guess that's where I get to now. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's a really good point. I think my underpinning value base is, if I put words to it, because a value system for me, you'll have your primary value base, but you'll have anti-values as well. I call them anti-values, which is obviously the contrasting ones. And for me, probably the primary value I have is I'd rather die before I give up. And that's probably allowed me to achieve what I have, because it's not brains that have got me there, that's for sure. That's that didn't work. I remember Fozzie called me into his office one day after a team test, and he said, that didn't go very well, did it, David? So I'm really grateful to Fozzie because he helped me find my way. Like if it had been a different coach, he probably wouldn't have, he was very guiding and understanding and allowed me to find my way in the sport, and I suppose in that industry. So didn't give up.
I think that's a really important story. Like, because there's, we kind of live in a world where everyone wants to be perfect, right? It's like, I can't do anything wrong. I can't fail. I can't trip up. I can't make a wrong decision, wrong turn or anything. And it's like, you are a living proof of, just keep throwing shit against the wall. Eventually something's going to stick. And then know the formula and then keep going. Like it's inevitable. Life is a gray area. We're going to make the wrong decisions. We're going to try something and it's not going to work out. Like that's inevitable. And being able to keep going is the only thing that we got, right?
I love listening and talking to people who failed magnificently. Like it's when they've put in everything that they could, they've invested, they've had discipline and diligence, and it all fails. It's like, okay, now they have integrity, because they get nothing. They get nothing in return. You get a gold medal or whatever it is, and that's fantastic icing or cherry on the icing on top of the cake. But I really love the stories of people that throw the book at it, and it doesn't work. It's a full stop. There's no nice ending, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. What do you do now?
what next? And that's really rare that someone can have that philosophy and do that. Like, I find that really special, because most people will only invest if they've got a reasonable chance of success. Where we think about the definition of success, and they may be not fully invested until they get some reassurance it's going to go okay, and then that's never pure, and they don't feel it. They don't feel it either. They know it's not purity because it's hedged. But when you find people who aren't hedged, that's special.
Yeah, for sure. You've got to have met rock bottom, right? You got to know where it is. Like, hey, I've been down there and I'm not going back. Like, something's got to work. If I give you everything I have and it doesn't work, I've got to find a way. Like,
you've got to find a way. Totally.
Find a way or make one. Right?
And the more you have online, the more that the fear is real. And then if you're able to hold yourself in that space and embrace it, feel it, feed it, smell it, taste it, be with it, and then all of a sudden it's not fear anymore, it's just energy. And then if you've got a good mentor, a good coach, a good plan, and then you get underway, mate, that's the gold right there, if you can generate that, because that's where the magic really happens, because most people are influenced by the fear in a way which inhibits them, and becomes a handbrake in the process, and they try and repress it or stop it or get rid of it or take some drugs for it, or whatever it is, and they've missed the point that what they've done then is they've basically squashed life. And then there's no way, a lot of athletes will say, they feel flat before their biggest moment, or they'll feel lethargic just before they play, and they don't know what it's about. And for me, those are the signs straight away that someone's scared and they've repressed it, or they're scared and they've distracted themselves and they haven't acknowledged it, or haven't leaned into it, or embraced it, or wanted it, or the relationship with it's wrong. And you see that often, like you'll hear dry reaching in the changing room, or you just see various rituals which are all fear-based, trying to escape and not feel it, music or dancing or whatever it might be, but not as an intentional purity. That's their avoidance of the pressure. And so there's something magic about having a I guess it's not a religious thing, it's a spiritual world. When I say that word spirit, for me, spirit is about energy. And so it's more than a character or a trait or a state. It's, there's something very deep about the person that has a relationship with the universe where they understand their mortality. They ain't too fussed about it, whether they die at 30, 50, 70, 90. If it happens, when it happens, it happens. It's just part of the way the world flows, or the universe flows. So, if you can have that sort of peace with it all, then that flows off into peace with failing, and peace with, and ironically, the other end of the continuum, peace with glory, because a lot of people get blown away by glory as much as they do by the fear of failure. And so if you have that really core base, where the essence of yourself is incredibly humble and incredibly competitive, then you've got a lovely mixture, because you've got someone that will run onto a field and go, they'll be there because they love it. And then secondly, there's a real sense that those key moments where others will back off or have a break or be on the heels of their feet, these ones they are leaping in. They're leaping in there like that is the essence of life, and it is for them. So it's a very special place if you can find that relationship with it all. It changes the face of the moment. It certainly changes it from being one of a sporting moment, which it will always be. It's always, I never try and take that away from an athlete, that is a big sporting moment. Yet when we find the place that we're talking about at the moment, it's no longer about sport at all.
Totally.
It's like essentially you're standing next to William Wallace, or standing next to Robert the Bruce with your ancestors. It's the same feeling, the same moment, it's the same place. So, it's a addictive one. It's addictive for them when they totally, and it's addictive for them when they understand that and find the recipe to be able to go there regularly and repeatedly. It's certainly addictive helping people go. You really, that's why I love UFC. The first time I saw UFC, it was like, whoa, that's brutal. But the more I look at it, the more I think about it, it's probably one of the, I think rugby's the same. Rugby league. There's a few sports that have the same element of two people coming together and signing a waiver that you might die tonight, and you accept that's no one's responsible.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're in that context, it's a very different thing from netball or tennis or so there's just something about the combat space that allows, I feel, a really different spiritual experience, because you have to really become at one with the dark lands and the shadow. And, if you go into that space, you willingly, like there's this dark shadow there about you're okay with hurting somebody and potentially killing them. And then you're okay that they might get you. So there's, even though that's not, you think obviously you don't want to, but to be really in that dark space, I believe that's a process that is important. And then you'll see some rugby players, they won't have gone to that place. And usually every year in a super team, you'll have 4 or 5 that they love that space. Or maybe 5 to 10. Maybe 5. When I mean love that space, they do. And if you're on their days off, you can't find them. You'll know they're in the boxing ring.
Yeah.
They'll be at a club somewhere having a fight. And then you'll have maybe 10 to 15 within the team that when someone smacks them on the nose, they then drop in. And then you'll have, so what's that, 20 to 30, but then you'll have 15 to 20 of players that are very skilled, but they don't go in there. And then you'll have a couple that, probably will never make it. So you can sort of see how the combat space really identifies that primal space that you just talked about. And it's a hellishly exciting space to work in, because it's, I remember the psychologist ethics code is you should do no harm and not facilitate others to do harm. And so you can see how that doesn't fit. Man, in rugby, you're working with athletes and trainers and coaches to dominate, to potentially do harm in the way that they play. Again, not intentionally, but you accept that's a byproduct of the brutality of it. So you can see how it's an interesting dilemma for practicing as a psychologist in that space, because of the conversations that you're having, the emotions you're feeling, the things you're encouraging. Yep.
Do you think it's do you think everyone should have the ability to go to that place?
If there's something about, if I think there's 2 things in my mind, which is the dark side always needs a value base to hold it. So, your dark and light values, compassion and brutality, or competitiveness and empathy. Without the maybe human container, those unbridled dark values are not, I don't believe, are beneficial for a community. And if you've got a good value base and you've got a shadow and you're open to going into that space, you certainly learn, like people will learn about themselves and they'll learn about life in a completely different way by going. And, like really, I do believe a secondary school education, there'll be some real benefit from making sure that everybody can swim in an ocean and everybody is required to do some form of self-defense and everyone's required and given opportunities to learn martial arts, and then also do identity work and do community charity work as classrooms and spend every, a day of their week, each week, actually out in the community giving back. So you can see how that you just wouldn't just teach them combat. It's a balance. And I think the Shaolin monks, probably the Kung Fu monasteries, do that probably the best out of all, because they've got to go through as a monk and as a Kung Fu fighter. And then in the end, they're not allowed to, right? That's right, yeah. And they're not allowed to graduate on until they've got each one all the way together. And you obviously, those guys spend their entire lifetime in a monastery, and they have to become as good with the Buddha teaching as they do with the Kung Fu. So that I think that's a lovely metaphor for. I'd love it. Imagine if everybody was as peaceful as a Shaolin Kung Fu monk. The world would be a different place if they all had the harmony of those things. Because if we think about dictatorships around the world, that's a result of it's too dark. They're just dark. So I certainly believe humanity lives in all places, and then that's the one that the society has sort of moved to a point where it's so safe and so regulated and contained, so that everyone's okay. And as you said earlier on, everyone has this moment about needing to be perfect, is that people are petrified of being unwell, which is really petrified of death. And then their obsessive anxiety-based behaviors, controlling, power and control, things that make people feel really unhappy, run riot really. And so if you can, you find harmony in the dark. You find, the metaphor is really powerful when you can become a. I was talking to someone the other day about the old, when you're a kid, there's a monster under the bed. And they were saying, you just need to sit there and tell yourself there's no monster. And I was like, well, that's what we tell our kids, there's no monster. But what if we told them there is a monster? And actually, we're going to go under the bed with them to meet the monster. And then we're going to take a stick with us and hit it between the eyes so it doesn't behave itself. And club it. And then we're going to be friends with that monster, and he's going to become a pet. And we're going to bring him out from under the bed, and he's going to get a little wee corner bed to go and sleep in. And then you can see how now we've changed the whole dynamic of the conversation, where it's not don't be afraid of the monster under the bed, but go find the monster under the bed. Because if we can move to that space, the sense of resilience and interdependence you grow in your children, they're monsters. But they're my mates as long as they behave. If they don't behave, I'll smack them in the head. So I do believe that if we're going to find an internal harmony with ourselves, that's going to involve realizing our own darkness. It's going to involve realizing that within all of us, there is a potential murderer. There is potentially someone that could very easily, at the right context and a certain context, harm. And then all of a sudden we go, oh, actually, so I'm not all lights and shining armor. It's actually badass in me too. And that allows me then to have empathy and connection for people that grow up in environments that might be, violent, and they learn that way rather than just being judging and exterminate. So there's some real importance for us to have a balanced community and balanced society, that people are able to know that space, hold that space, see that space. Yet society is moving us further and further away from that. And I fear for rugby, like it's a sport, the ACC, we've already putting pressure on, the amount of injuries The cost, I imagine rugby is probably the most expensive sport for ACC. And it's constantly getting dumbed down. I understand the sport's making the men faster and bigger and stronger, and it's crazy what they can do as a physical specimen. But it would be sad that we see rugby pass from our culture, because in the end it gets shut down because it's too violent. Because it's ironically that ability every Saturday to go and join men, to go and women as well, but to go and join a team, to go on a field, to go against another group in the dark lands, I reckon helps people have mental health. There's so many things around it, and if you look at the falling down of our community, our society over the last 30 years, we can look at all of the communities, and all the communities will have more than likely had clubs that had to amalgamate because the numbers were dropping and they couldn't exist by themselves. And all of a sudden we've gone from having 4 rugby clubs in a hometown to 2. Then they've got to travel further to get into the city to be part of a wider competition. And all of a sudden families can't travel down and have a pie and a beer watching the sidelines on the hood of the car, So rugby as a sport has such a massive influence in our community's health. So does the netball courts and the cricket clubs and the tennis clubs. They all become central parts to connection and mental health and supporting each other and working through hard times and doing working bees. There's so many things that fall off it. So do we need to go to the dark lands? I reckon, yeah. And then secondly, we also then need to be part of communities, and we find that in all those spaces. And yeah,
I love that approach and couldn't agree any more. And I think everything is now centered around like numbing feelings, right? It's just like, oh no, it's fine. Don't go to the extremes. Like, don't show massive amount of passion because you come across super confident or cocky or whatever the fuck it is. And also don't like get super depressed or anxious. You can't do that. You just got to be this organic being that sits in the middle and can't really feel things and become more like automated intelligence, right? Or artificial intelligence, like be a robot. I'm like, whoa, hold on. We've taken like the human out of humanity here. It doesn't make any sense. Like, we're supposed to pendulum from one side to the other. We're supposed to sit in the middle, then also spiral and come back and figure it out and think and fight and all these things, like, because you figure out what it means to live. You figure out what it means to be a human. And I think about a lot of things. Like we said at the start, like I'm a writer too, right? So I'll sit down and I'll usually my mind will go there, and it doesn't make any sense how we're like just getting rid of all the fringes and just been like, you have to stay between these 2 lines, and these 2 lines are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And we're like, we acknowledge we're all different, right? We're like, okay, yeah, whether it's gender, age, like ethnicity, whatever it is, we all acknowledge that we're different. However, we all have to be the same. It's like, wait, hold on a minute. This is hypocritical. Can we not see this? No. Let it be. 2 + 2 is 5. It's 5 now. We're like, wait, what's going on? And it's I find it super, super strange, and I have no idea why it's happening. No idea how to change it. But I think the approach of going into schools is a beautiful one. It's absolutely phenomenal. Of like, it's like warrior monk, right? Or the philosophical fighter, where like, okay, cool, yeah, you're gonna learn how to do some physicality stuff, but then you're also going to learn how to draw and give back and litter pick and all the little things in society that seem like they're now getting dropped. How many people say hello to you in the street these days, mate? Like,
yeah, exactly.
I said, I was sweeping the front of the gym yesterday morning, right? I like those manual labor stuff. It's where therapeutic, and it kind of goes back to what I was doing like back in the day, and I like it. Like no job is beneath you. Sweeping the front of the gym, and like this lad just walked past on the pavement. Beautiful morning, right? You couldn't not be in a good mood. Beautiful morning. I just look at, hi mate, morning. Literally looks at me, looks down on the floor, and like speeds up. I'm like, what's going on?
Oh wow.
I'm like, those little things have now Like no one does them. It's crazy. And then we turn around and be like, well, how have we got a mental health crisis? I'm like, maybe because we're not doing the little things. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it, like they've talked about there's this whole reset conspiracy conversation about what, I guess globally and around currency and money and stuff. But I wonder whether we're moving to a reset around power. Like it just feels like the things that you and I are talking about have been let go, and they really haven't been protected like they should be from central government. But that doesn't surprise me. And it's achieved what they wanted. And now you and I are watchful of each other. And that really worries me, because that's what that young fella is. He's walking past you, say good morning. He's unable to connect and go, hey, morning, mate. How you going? Oh, is this your gym? Oh, what are you doing here? Do you always sweep the footpath? Oh, that's good, man. I love the Japanese do that too. I love how people look after their front garden. Whatever, there's no conversation. So ironically, if we take it deeper, there's a whole sense of a community that's full of mental health and violence is very easy to govern, because everybody's so caught up in survival. They're inside their house, lock the door, 3 locks, close the windows, fences around houses now, man. I just can't. When I was a kid, I was lucky. I grew up in very, very rural. My closest neighbour was probably 3 or 4 kilometres away. And we only had fences because of the animals. But cities in those days had no fences. So old school New Zealand had houses on streets and no fences. So you'd have your tidal boundary pegs, and that would be one house. They used to be called the classic quarter-acre section. And so you have a street and just quarter-acre sections down each side of the street, and then on the other street you've got quarter-acre sections backing onto each other, and there are no fences. So essentially your quarter-acre section rolled onto another quarter-acre section, rolled onto another quarter-acre section, rolled onto another quarter-acre section, and behind you the same. And so you just had kids. You can imagine what that's like, just kids everywhere. Fun big park. And that was probably, that would have been quintessential urban New Zealand. And now we look at quintessential urban New Zealand, and all the fences are probably 1.8 meters tall, 1.85 meters tall. They're all wooden paneling. So there's no gap. It's all wooden paneling. And the houses are on, 6,000 or 7,000 square meters. Just enough to mow around the outside with a little bit of grass, maybe out the back outside the patio. But you can't see the neighbours' windows, and the windows are all covered in anyway, so they're frosted. So there's no surprise that we've got people sitting in those houses killing themselves. And so at the moment, I think it was something like 1.6, the stats, 1.6, 1.7 people a day kill themselves. I imagine the last year, though, it's worse than that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we're pushing 2 a day. So 2 people a day in New Zealand, they're done. When we don't, the Chiefs lost a young fella yesterday, young man. I think it was, we're not too sure yet what it was that was underneath it, but rugby feels a pretty sad story. So I don't know what the details are about it though. So if we go, I know the Blues lost a young fella in 2017. Cycling, I'm involved in cycling. We lost a cyclist recently. It's Olivia Podmore, a lovely, lovely young lady. So there's those stories that we hear about, but 2 a day. And that's what you're talking about and what I'm talking about. And how's that? When I went to school, 86 was my first year at high school. There were less than 2 million people in New Zealand. I remember that year we had 2 million people. Imagine what New Zealand was like with just under 2 million people. Auckland, the farm in Auckland in 1986, there was farm to Takanini or Manukau Harbour. So Papakura in Auckland was a community village in 1986. Howick and all of those areas were all farms. unbelievable the progress that's happened in such a short time. That year, I remember when we hit 2 million, people were like, far out, this is terrible. This is going to be the fragmentation of society. You watch, it's just going to fall apart now because we're overpopulated. And then we had 4 murders that year.
Is that it?
And I think one of them, if that was it. And I think we had a little girl who was abducted and sexually abused in the Napier Marine Parade, I think. So 3 and a little girl. So those were 4 for 1 year. And you just go now, I don't know how many people are murdered a week. I'd hate to think, well, I don't know what that stat is, but I know what the suicide stat is because that's my business. But I imagine the murder stats are pretty bloody shocking too. So I've got people in rage and people in despair. You know, so I guess those people that are also killing other people will probably be close to killing themselves. So you've got so much falling down around us, and you know, that's why I love sport. I think sport needs to be, I'm pleased high performance sport in New Zealand is looked after and considered important for the well-being and health, because it is. I do believe that high performance contracts, though, should require them to do more community work and more coaching in schools. So those, you know, my way of the sport is they should be all having to go back 1 day a week and coach a team, coach kids. But I know they're busy and their schedules are busy and they've got big things they want to achieve, but I still would love it if the PEGS funding and all those sorts of things and the rugby contracts all have a community clause. Yeah, many do it because they want to.
Yeah, it's the whole thing of like a social enterprise, right? So you kind of rig the system of capitalism, you make money, but then also it's written in that you have to then go give some of it back, even if that's just time, right? And you don't actually just roll money everywhere and just make it rain. In the sense of, okay, well, I'm going to go do my job so I can, you know, make a good living out myself and do whatever I want to do with that. But I also need it in my contract where a day a week I'm going to go into a skill or a decile, like one area or whatever it is, right? I think that's the way to go about it. I think philanthropist tax is the way to go about it. You know, if you're in the highest band, okay, great, you give millions of dollars to the government. Okay, fantastic. But that's just creating a middleman, right? And where's that going? I'm Northern English, so I'm very skeptical of governments. Like, you know, so that's in my blood. But also I'm like, if I'm going to go make a difference, I'm going to go make a difference. Like, I'm not going to be like, David, here's like $5. Can you then go give it to the kid who's living on the street? I'm going to be like, no, I will go buy the kid some food. Or I'll like, you've got a place to stay.
That's right. And have a chat with them.
Yeah, go do the work. Like, everyone likes to talk, right? Everyone likes to talk. No one wants to walk. I'm like, if you seriously want some change, go do the work.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I think that's the big reset that's coming, that the powers have missed. Like, they're driving, you know, there's big powers, you know, like people who do the reading understand how the world works.
Oh yeah.
And those powers are currently very active, driving an agenda. And I remember my first sociology lecture at Canterbury University in 1991. I walk in, sit down, 300 people in that lecture, which is pretty big for a farm boy. 300 people come and do sociology, and I'm sitting in the middle of the room. And a guy that looks just like Karl Marx walks in. Unreal. Like, honestly, he could have been Karl Marx, and he just stood in front of the turntable and stood silently for like 5 minutes. And I'm just like, who's this guy? And then he looks across the top of his turnstiles for his microphone and goes, there will be a revolution. That was his first sentence, then nothing. He goes, but the big question is the leader in this room?
Ooh.
That was pretty much it. That was his first lecture. He had a Scotch club. He'd have just conversations around whiskey and conversations about, you know, rebellion and revolutions and all that sort of stuff. And then, you know, you look at the space we're in now, crikey, it's primed. Globally, it's primed for someone who talks a certain way which connects hearts, and helps clarity evolve from fear, and sensibility from fear. Yeah, so I think that the time of us to go back to club footy and back to club tennis and back to club cricket and back to schools, that, I'm not saying bring the cane back, but man, they were still cane when I was at high school, and we're fine. So there's lots of things that have been lost. There's lots of things that have been lost from our eras before that we think we're evolving and progressing, but our mental health stats and our violence stats don't tell us we're progressing in the slightest. So yeah, it will be interesting to see where where our children, my grandchildren and your children, what sort of what that looks like.
Yeah, it's crazy because I'll think back, right, enjoying education, like I struggled in, like I put in a lot of work, like granted, I worked hard, but was never gonna make it as an academic, put it that way. And will still struggle with like reading and shit. Like I will, although I'm a published poet, which is kind of ironic, but I'll read something back and be like, well, yeah, that makes sense, and then someone will point at something out and I'm like, oh yeah, that's the wrong order, or that's completely different. And that's just, I don't know if that's the way my brain works or whatever, but I'll think back and I'm like, okay, we're taught in a very, very specific way, right? And you're going to know like this much about the world, and that's how you're going to thrive.
Sure are. Yeah, and, that's right.
Yeah,
it's all part of the machine.
All part of a machine, right? A cog in a wheel. And I will wholeheartedly say it is because personally I've gone through the ringer upstairs, and now I'm able to look at it through a different light. I'm able to like kind of put on different lenses and look through the glasses and be like, whoa, hold on a minute. Like it's kind of like I'm in the Matrix and I've woken up and
it is the Matrix.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is the Matrix, man. That movie was well before its time, but shit, how accurate it is.
Totally.
Now, Alex, I need to go and have a piss. I'm bursting for a piss.
Go for it.
So I'm just going to go for a wee. And I wonder whether you can read us some of your poetry for us to wrap this up, because it's gone 11 o'clock, so maybe we can finish on some of your poems.
Give over.
I'm intrigued. Apologies for that.
And I give over. Like,
yeah, okay. So what sort of poetry do you write?
Nah, like it started, it was weird. It took me like 6 years to make the first book, which looks like that.
Time seemed dark. Wicked.
Yeah, give us your address whenever we stop recording, so you don't just publicly announce it, and I'll send you a copy. What's
the cover? Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, that's Manchester.
Or is it just
so that's actually from a New Zealand artist. Very, very good mate of mine. I would class him as family. Basically, I got over here. I'm on my own, and Christmas is coming up, right? And he was like, "Well," and I coached him at the gym. So I met him. So, what are you doing for Christmas? I'm like, I don't know. Grab a beer, sit on the beach. Like I'm 12,000 miles from home and no fucking nobody. And he was like, give us a minute. And it comes back like 15 minutes later and I was like, I've just rang the missus, like, you're going to come with us and we're going to go with my family to the Coromandel and for like 3 days or whatever. I was like, holy shit, what's the Coromandel? I'm like, no idea what's going on, which was insane.
Good. How good.
he did the font, and his wife did the cover. But yeah, that's old school Manchester. I'm from west side of Manchester, and that's cobble streets, terrace housing. It's the way it is. It's what I grew up around. You know, everyone was like you said, like with fences and everyone's got a quarter acre and stuff. I'm like, no. Like if you've got 2 bedrooms, like you're doing extremely well. You know what I mean? It's everyone is shoulder to shoulder. It's a very
real, very raw and real.
Yeah, but I
remember listening to Sting.
Oh yeah,
Sting do an interview, and he said he lost his poetry for a long time, and it wasn't until he went home to where he was from, which was down one end of the street was the coal mine, and down the other end of the street was the shipbuilder's yard, and that's where he grew up. And he said it was until he went home. Obviously, we know Sting's very successful artist and musician and poetry writer.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he didn't get his back. He had a block, and he couldn't get it back until he went home. And he said it was when I went home I realised I'd been blocking who I was and where I was from, and it's very powerful.
Yeah, man. Like that's what influenced this one. Like the journey it took over that 6 years, and kind of living on the street a couple of times and going through that. So that's what made that. The second one's a bit different, and then which will be published hopefully in the next month or so. And I feel like I'm a bit of a blog. I'm going more like philosophical rather than poetry. You know what I mean? Like I'm kind of asking questions and then elaborating on a question myself. And maybe I'll go down that route and make one that way.
Well, merging into Aristotle.
I give over. With a better accent.
Imagine he would have done poetry too. You imagine those guys back in those days. They must have all the way they write, or what I don't know them very well, but obviously bits and pieces. All those quotes. When you think about the quotes that we remember them by, they could all have been from poems as well.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, who shall see?
Oh, that's wicked, man. I've enjoyed it. I really enjoyed today. It's been lovely to connect with you, and I love the story too. Like, obviously we're just touching on it now, but it sounds like your story is one where, I love connecting with people that come from nothing, and there's just there's just something about that place where their perspective, their inner peace. At times it's tumultuous as well, but there's an inner peace that comes with the tumultuous times as well. I love it because it's really, it just feels like, I don't even find the right word for it. It's the humanness.
It's real, right? It's raw.
Yeah, there's no illusion. No illusion. Everyone's fucking on about everything. People don't know who they are. So many bloody illusions and layers that people are so lost, and it's just that anyway, the love listening and connecting with you. It's been fun.
Thank you, brother. I'll make it to the South Island. I'm in the South Island. I'll make it to the North Island sometime. We'll go grab a coffee. Totally.
Come and stay.
Whenever, borders are a little bit more open, there's so much restrictions, so there's no point going anywhere now. Totally.
However that evolves over the next 6 months, we'll catch up.
Sounds great. When you have to pop down.
Yeah, I love coming down. I obviously love the South Island. We've got a girl down at the Dunedin, so
wow,
nice.
Yeah. Pop down, man. Let me know when you're here.
All right, Alex.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Have a great day.
Take it easy.
See you later.
You too.